$1 billion chapel, 50 miles of hidden archives, and $2 trillion in global wealth. These are the secrets of how the Vatican hides its fortune. The Vatican's roots, a humble beginning. Before it became the smallest country in the world, the Vatican was at the center of a sprawling empire known as the Papal States. This wasn't just a symbolic realm, it was a political and economic powerhouse covering over 15,000 square miles of what you now know as Italy. From the early days of the Church, popes held both spiritual and secular power, acting as kings who ruled over lands, collected taxes, and maintained armies. The Papal States thrived on agricultural wealth. Fields of wheat, vineyards, and olive groves were cultivated, with the resulting produce traded for profit. These lands were a steady source of income, but they also brought political complications. Neighboring regions frequently sought to invade or seize control, forcing the Church to dedicate resources to defending its territory. The grandeur of the Vatican as you know it began to take shape during this time. Cathedrals, palaces, and basilicas were constructed to showcase the power and glory of the Church. St. Peter's Basilica itself became the epicenter of this growing empire. Designed not only as a place of worship, but as a symbol of authority. But all this wealth required constant maintenance, lavish courts, extravagant ceremonies, and the upkeep of clergy and soldiers drained resources. To support these expenses, the Church levied taxes on its subjects. Plus, trade was heavily regulated, with fees and tariffs imposed on merchants. But as the years passed, even these sources of revenue weren't enough to sustain the Church's ambitions. Faced with mounting costs, the popes realized they needed a new and innovative way to generate income, something that would tap into their most loyal resource: the faithful. The cash cow, indulgences. The idea of indulgences wasn't initially about making money. It began as a form of penance. In the early days of the Church, believers who committed sins were required to perform acts of contrition, such as prayer, fasting, or pilgrimages. These acts were seen as a way to atone for their misdeeds and reduce the time their souls would spend in purgatory after death. But the concept soon evolved into a transactional system. By the 6th century, the Church introduced indulgences as a formalized practice. Instead of completing a penance, believers could make a financial donation to the Church to achieve the same spiritual benefit. The more significant the sin, the higher the cost of the indulgence. This created a tiered system where wealthier individuals could buy forgiveness for even the gravest of sins. This practice quickly became a financial juggernaut. The fear of eternal damnation drove people to spend their hard-earned money to secure their place in heaven, or at least shorten their stay in purgatory. The Church capitalized on this fear, crafting a narrative that indulgences were not just a way to absolve personal sins, but also an opportunity to help deceased loved ones ascend to heaven. The sale of indulgences wasn't limited to local churches. Traveling preachers were dispatched to spread the message, often using theatrics and emotional appeals to convince villagers to part with their money. Entire towns would gather to hear these sermons, and collections would pour in by the thousands. The funds generated were used to finance everything from military campaigns to the construction of iconic religious landmarks like St. Peter's Basilica. But the system wasn't without its flaws. Corruption ran rampant as clergy and officials abused their authority to sell indulgences for personal profit. Some priests even went so far as to fabricate sins or create elaborate stories to guilt parishioners into paying more. The moral and ethical implications of this practice sparked outrage among some church members, leading to growing criticism. By the 16th century, the backlash against indulgences had reached a boiling point. Reformers like Martin Luther condemned the practice, arguing that it was exploitative and contrary to the teachings of Christ. His famous 95 Theses, nailed to the church door in Wittenberg, directly challenged the legitimacy of indulgences, igniting the Protestant Reformation. Despite this controversy, indulgences had already achieved their purpose. For centuries, they had filled the Church's coffers and allowed the Vatican to fund its expansion and maintain its influence. Even as the practice waned in popularity, the wealth it generated laid the foundation for the Vatican's financial empire, one that continues to thrive in new and innovative ways today. While indulgences were a golden ticket to riches, the Vatican's real mastery lay in adapting to crises. What would they do when revolutions and war drained their resources? From crisis to opportunity. In the 19th century, the Vatican faced one of its greatest financial crises. After centuries of dominating the Papal States, revolutions and unification movements in Italy stripped the Church of most of its lands. By 1870, the once vast Papal States were reduced to just Vatican City, a mere 0.17 square miles. The loss was not only territorial but also financial, as the Church could no longer rely on taxes and agricultural income from its subjects. This marked a turning point. Desperate to secure its survival, the Church pivoted to a new strategy, investing in private ventures. The Vatican began purchasing property in Rome and surrounding areas, focusing on prime locations that would yield long-term value. This strategy allowed the Church to build a new foundation of wealth while maintaining a low profile. The Church's innovation didn't stop there. To recover even more, they launched the Peter's Pence initiative, which was a global call for donations from Catholics worldwide. Presented as a way for the faithful to support the Pope's spiritual mission, it became a consistent revenue stream. This appeal capitalized on the deep connection between believers and their faith, making sure that even during economic downturns, money continued to flow into the Vatican's treasury. But the early 20th century brought new challenges. World War I severely impacted the Vatican's financial stability as global donations dropped and investments in Italy faced uncertainty. The Church found itself once again in a precarious position, but it didn't give up. Instead, it adapted, laying the groundwork for the financial empire you see today. Because losing land might seem like the end for most empires, but for the Vatican, it was just the beginning. The real story lies in how they turned desperation into a modern-day financial empire. Mussolini's deal with the Vatican. By the 1920s, the Vatican's financial recovery was steady, but far from complete. That's where Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader of Italy, comes in. Mussolini understood the Catholic Church's strong influence on Italian society and saw a chance to strengthen his regime by forming an alliance with the Vatican. This led to the 1929 Lateran Treaty, a pivotal agreement for both the Church and Italy. Through this treaty, Mussolini officially recognized Vatican City as an independent sovereign state. It wasn't just about politics, it included a financial settlement. The Church received 1.75 billion lire in cash and government bonds as compensation for losing the Papal States. For Mussolini, it was a calculated move to gain the Church's support and win over Italy's deeply religious population, helping to stabilize his rule. For the Vatican, the treaty was a much-needed financial boost. The compensation allowed the Church to expand its investments, acquire real estate, and build financial reserves. It also marked a shift in strategy as the Vatican began adopting modern financial practices instead of relying solely on donations and traditional income sources. Beyond money, the treaty reinforced the Vatican's position as a spiritual leader while granting it political neutrality. This neutrality became crucial during World War II, enabling the Church to avoid taking sides and ensuring its survival during global turmoil. So a handshake with a dictator brought the Vatican back to financial power, but the next chapter in their story would involve deals even more shocking. World War II, profiting amidst chaos. Officially, the Vatican remained neutral during the war, avoiding direct involvement in the conflict. But this neutrality also allowed the Church to conduct financial dealings with both sides without facing consequences. One of its most controversial relationships was with Nazi Germany. To boost its finances, the Vatican allowed the Third Reich to deduct a portion of Catholic workers' wages in Germany and transfer the funds directly to Vatican accounts. This arrangement provided a steady income and showed the Church's willingness to collaborate with authoritarian regimes when it benefited them. In 1942, the Vatican created its own financial institution, the Vatican Bank, which gave it unmatched secrecy and independence. Operating beyond the reach of international regulators, the bank allowed transactions to occur without leaving a trace. Wealthy individuals, including German elites, used the Vatican Bank to safeguard and move their money, often through Swiss intermediaries. This protected their assets from wartime restrictions and scrutiny. One of the most troubling allegations from this period involves unclaimed life insurance policies of Jewish families who died in Nazi concentration camps. Without death certificates, impossible to obtain from the camps, insurance companies refused to pay out, and some of this money is believed to have ended up in the Vatican Bank. From secret bank accounts to wartime alliances, the Vatican's next move would cement its reputation as one of the most secretive financial powerhouses in history. Real estate, a global empire. What makes the Vatican's real estate portfolio particularly unique is its global reach and the diversity of its holdings. Unlike most landlords, the Catholic Church owns properties across the globe, spanning continents from Europe and North America to developing nations. Its real estate holdings are massive and diverse, generating significant income to support Vatican operations. In Rome, the Church's real estate empire is unmatched. Beyond Vatican City itself, it owns historic buildings, apartments and commercial spaces throughout Italy. These properties, including valuable landmarks and luxury accommodations, bring in rental income from wealthy tenants and tourists. In New York City, the Church is the largest private landowner in Manhattan. Its properties range from schools and churches to administrative offices and commercial spaces leased to high-end retailers. As real estate values in Manhattan rise, the Church's investments continue to grow in worth. Similar holdings exist in other prime locations, such as London and Paris, where the Church owns properties in some of the world's most expensive neighborhoods. One major advantage for the Vatican is its tax-exempt status. As a religious institution, many of its properties are not subject to property taxes, allowing the Church to keep more of its profits and avoid costs that other landlords face. This gives the Vatican a significant financial edge in the real estate market. The Church also owns extensive agricultural land in rural areas. These lands are often leased to farmers, providing another stream of income, and some properties are even converted into conservation areas or pilgrimage sites, combining religious purpose with financial benefits. Although the Vatican's real estate strategy is built for the long term, properties are rarely sold, ensuring that the Church's wealth grows steadily over generations. This buy-and-hold approach makes the real estate portfolio not just a source of income today, but a lasting foundation of wealth for the future. The Vatican's investments stretch far beyond Rome, but how does their real estate strategy make them billions while staying invisible? The Vatican's priceless art collection, housing over 70,000 works, only a fraction of these masterpieces are on display, with many more stored in climate-controlled vaults. These works span centuries, representing the finest achievements in human creativity, from the Renaissance to the Baroque period. Artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, Caravaggio and Bernini contributed to this unparalleled treasure trove, creating pieces that define the history of Western art. One of the most famous rooms is, of course, the Sistine Chapel, with its ceiling painted by Michelangelo. But the Vatican museums also include the Raphael rooms, where frescoes like the School of Athens illustrate philosophical and theological debates. Other sections feature Egyptian mummies, ancient maps, and even modern art by figures like Salvador Dalí and Pablo Picasso. Each artwork has a story. For example, the Laocoon group, an ancient Greek sculpture depicting a Trojan priest and his sons being attacked by sea serpents, was discovered in 1506 and immediately acquired by Pope Julius II. This sculpture is said to have influenced Michelangelo's own work on the Sistine Chapel. The collection is not just a symbol of the Church's wealth, but also its historical role as a patron of the arts. Over centuries, popes commissioned, acquired and preserved art to reflect their power and piety. While these treasures are technically not for sale, their combined worth is estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. Beyond their monetary value, the artworks cement the Vatican's influence in cultural history. Tourism is another critical aspect of the Vatican's art collection. The Vatican museums attract over 6 million visitors annually, generating millions of dollars in ticket sales. This money funds preservation efforts, ensuring that these priceless pieces remain intact for future generations. However, critics argue that the commercialization of such sacred art detracts from its spiritual significance. Despite being a public showcase of beauty and faith, the Vatican's collection also raises questions. For instance, many of these treasures were acquired during periods of colonialism or war, and some argue they belong to the nations from which they were taken. This ongoing debate highlights the complex legacy of the Vatican as both a guardian and a collector of art. So clearly, their walls are lined with masterpieces worth billions. But what do these treasures reveal about the Vatican's power and influence? Modern scandals and financial maneuvers. In recent decades, the Vatican has faced some of the most damaging scandals in its history. From financial mismanagement to global abuse allegations, these controversies have tested the Church's reputation and its ability to maintain trust. One of the most significant challenges came with the widespread revelations of abuse by clergy. By 2002, the church had already paid out $175 million in settlements to victims, a number that grew to over $3 billion by 2014. These payouts not only strained the Vatican's finances, but also led to a sharp decline in donations as public confidence plummeted. To counter the financial and reputational fallout, the Vatican employed strategic public relations moves, including the election of Pope Francis in 2013. His image as a reformer and advocate for the poor helped the Church rebuild its standing with followers. But even as the Vatican appeared to make reforms, critics accused it of prioritizing damage control over meaningful change. Behind the scenes, financial maneuvers were essential to keeping the Church solvent. These included reallocating assets, liquidating less critical holdings, and leaning heavily on its vast real estate empire to generate income. The Vatican also attempted to clean up its financial institutions, particularly the Vatican Bank, which had long been associated with secrecy and scandal. In 2019, a major investigation revealed suspicious transactions involving millions of euros, prompting the Church to promise greater transparency. Yet progress has been slow, with ongoing concerns about money laundering and misuse of funds. But even with modern controversies threatening their image, the Vatican always has a plan, and it's one that keeps their fortune growing. The Vatican's offshore secrets. The Vatican's wealth isn't limited to what's visible in real estate or art. It also includes a network of offshore accounts and investments. These accounts help the Vatican diversify its financial activities and operate away from public and governmental scrutiny. Offshore accounts allow the Church to invest in areas that might otherwise attract criticism, such as luxury goods or pharmaceuticals. By using intermediaries and shell companies, the Vatican can remain hidden while benefiting from high returns. This method keeps the Church's involvement private and shields it from backlash. Switzerland, known for its strict banking secrecy, has played a key role in the Vatican's financial strategy. Swiss banks have historically been used to move large sums of money, including during and after World War II. In recent years, there have been reports of Vatican-linked funds being used to purchase luxury properties in London, raising concerns about how church donations are being spent. Offshore accounts also act as a safety net. By spreading its assets across multiple countries, the Vatican ensures its wealth remains protected during economic or political instability. This strategy allows the Church to stay financially secure, even in turbulent times. The Vatican's use of offshore investments highlights its business-like approach to managing money. These strategies not only protect and grow its wealth, but also give the Church the flexibility to adapt to changing global conditions, securing its financial dominance for the future. And that's just one way the Vatican keeps its massive fortune hidden from the world. But if you think this is fascinating, wait until you see how billionaires that live like they are poor manage their wealth. Click on that video next to uncover their surprising lifestyles.